Wage theft cases are notoriously hard to prove, and they almost never pay out. But for some of the most marginalized laborers in the city, justice was served. Before J.V. Carwash closed for good, it was open all the time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Workers put in 12-hour shifts, sponging, drying, and waxing the cars, cleaning the wheels, and vacuuming the interiors, 6 or even 7 days a week. They worked in frigid and searing weather, were expected to use harsh chemical cleaners without gloves, and endured abuse if they took a few minutes to rest. For all this, the employees were paid about $50 a day, roughly $4 an hour. Complaints about low wages were ignored. The manager would say, "If you want to work, then work," Juan Remigio Lacona said in Spanish. "If you don't want to work, you can go." Two workers, Marcos Diaz and Giovanni Paulino, had logged 8 years between them at the car wash when they concluded they did not want to work under those conditions and sought the advice of a lawyer. Both were immigrants from the Dominican Republic who had an imperfect command of English and an imperfect understanding of their rights under U.S. labor law. But in 2011, against long odds, they filed suit against their employer, alleging violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act and state labor law. The case against J.V. Carwash and its sister locations took some unusual turns, as the Carwash owner, Jose Vasquez, contrived a series of bizarre claims to undermine the workers' lawsuit. But the really surprising twist to this unlikely story, the Carwasheros, as they call themselves, won. By the time the last checks are dispersed this summer, almost 8 years after the suit was filed, the 106 workers who eventually signed on as plaintiffs will have received a share of roughly $8.5 million, a spectacular sum for a wage theft case. The average plaintiff award in a wage theft case is less than $6,000, according to Samuel Estreicher, a professor at New York University Law School and director of the school's Center for Labor and Employment Law. These carwasheros won an average of more than $80,000 per worker. Carwash workers are among the most marginal laborers in New York City's low-wage economy. Most are foreign-born, according to Carlos Encarnacion, an organizer with New York Communities for Change, often from the Dominican Republic, Central America and West Africa, and some unknowable number are undocumented, which makes them especially vulnerable to exploitation. Both the Attorney General's Office and the Department of Labor have investigated and recovered stolen wages in the carwash industry in recent years, and union organizers have been mobilizing carwash workers. But wage theft remains an endemic problem, and so far, only a few carwashes are unionized. For 15 years Martin Arena was on the night shift at J.V. Carwash in Inwood, which was known to the carwasheros as Broadway. The work was grueling and sometimes hazardous. The winters were the worst. When he got home at the end of his shift, he would soak in a hot bath. "I was in pain from the cold." Juan Remigio Lacona remembered a day at the Bronx location that he was told to clean out the underground pit where sludge and chemicals collect. "The smell was so strong, I was feeling dizzy," Mr. Lacona said through an interpreter. The manager insisted he finish the job. "You come from a poor country, you have dreams," said Aldo Cencion, who was born in the Dominican Republic. "But you never think that this reality could hit you so hard." Jose Vasquez came to the United States from Cuba at age 12. He didn't finish high school, but he saved his money and with his father bought a gas station in Inwood in the 1986, which became J.V. Carwash, though it was known simply as Broadway. Eventually he bought 3 more carwashes, one in Harlem, one in the Bronx and one in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Mr. Vasquez did not respond to requests for an interview, but Ofelia Sanchez, his girlfriend of 30 years, said that the carwash employees were not exploited. "We are immigrants ourselves," she said in a lengthy phone interview. "We treated them like family." The workers' claims that they had been underpaid, she said, were lies. "He may have had a different way of doing things," Ms. Sanchez said, "but Jose Vasquez is not a crook. He was certainly successful." Sometimes Mr. Vasquez would drive up in his red Ferrari or his Rolls-Royce, and the workers would wash it for him. None of the workers interviewed for this article could recall him ever leaving a tip. Mr. Vasquez's crews were nevertheless considered tipped workers. Like bartenders and waiters, manicurists and hairstylists, dog groomers and parking valets, the carwasheros depend on the generosity of customers to make a living. All these workers toil in industries that can legally pay employees according to a subminimum tipped wage scale. Gratuities from customers are supposed to make up the difference, but if tips are scarce, the employer is legally obliged to top up their pay envelopes to the standard minimum. But for some tipped workers, it doesn't work out that way. Car wash managers frequently help themselves to a portion of the tips, according to testimony at New York Labor Department hearings last summer. One worker testified that if the giant automatic brushes damaged a windshield wiper or a mirror, his boss would reach into the tip jar to compensate the customer. At the Vasquez car washes, workers had no notion of what their base wage might be, and whether the tips were actually coming to them. The managers would simply collect the money from the tip boxes at the end of each shift, take it into the office, and then hand the workers their wages in cash. "You don't know if the customers gave more tips or less tips," said Josue Gomez, who worked at Broadway for nearly 9 years. "They gave us an envelope, and we had to take whatever is inside." The workers were not alone in their confusion. The tipped wage is so complicated, with several different wage scales, depending on how plentiful tips are, that even scrupulous employers may find it hard to determine what they owe. That complexity also makes it difficult to sort out if workers are getting swindled. "I have many years of experience analyzing wage theft," said Deborah L. Axt, co-executive director at Make the Road New York, an advocacy organization. "But the payroll records for tipped workers are often bewildering. It's virtually impossible to detect and enforce wage theft with a system where employers are allowed to count tips toward the minimum wage," she said.